Now we have the steps for graphing standard form. Standard form is ax plus by equals c. There's some particulars here about standard form. You know, the a value has to be a positive integer, but you know, we're going to get into that in Unit 5 when we talk about writing equations. So for now, you just need to know that when the x and the y are on the same side, that's standard form. Okay, and here's the steps that we're going to utilize to graph standard form. So let's see what they look like as we do some example problems. So here's my first example problem. I have the equation 3x minus 4y equals 12. And we're going to graph this using standard form. So again, the first, you know, and I'm going to use a tool here to do this, but you could, you know, do it however you want from home. But the first step is to cover up the x term, okay, and then rewrite what you see. So when I cover up the x term, okay, I'm going to write down negative 4y equals 12. Okay, the second step is to cover up the y term and write down what you see. So I'm going to write that down. I see 3x equals 12. All right. Solve each new equation. So when I solve the equation for y, I'm going to divide by negative 4. Okay, so I end up with y equaling negative 3. When I solve the equation for x, I'm going to divide by 3. I get x equals 4. Okay, next step, plot the y answer on the y-axis. So I'm going to plot the y answer of negative 3 on the y-axis. Plot the x answer on the x-axis. So the x is 4. I'm going to plot that on the x-axis. And then I have 2 points. I can draw my line. So again, extend that line the whole way across the graph. And I've now graphed in standard form. All right, let me copy this because I'll need it for the next example. All right, new example. Let me get my cover up here. Okay, first step, cover up the x. Write down what I see. So I see 3y equaling 9. Okay, then I cover up the y and write down what I see. I see 2x equaling 9. Solve each of those equations. So y is going to equal 3 when I divide by 3. Divide by 3. Divide by 3. X is going to equal 4.5 when I divide by 3. And you see one of the downsides of this method would be that you are going to get some decimals at times that make this a little bit tougher. So you got to try your best to plot those points as accurately as possible. So if y is 3, that's up 3. If x is 4.5, that's over 4.5. And you got to get that point as close as you can. Again, use your ruler, your straight edge to graph that line. All right, and extend it the whole way across the coordinate plane in both directions. And I've now graphed 2x plus 3y equals 9 in standard form. Let's try one more example, see one more situation that we could get. Gets a little bit messier, you know, but that's okay. The process is still the same. So let's take a look and see what we end up with here. Cover up the x, and I have a half y. 1/2 y equals 10. All right, I cover up the y, and I get 5x equals 10. When I solve each of these, I'm going to end up with, when I divide by a half, okay, that's actually going to give me y equals 20. And we're going to talk about that. When I divide by 5, I'm going to get x equals 2. Well, that one's okay. All right, but the problem here is that the y number that we found, the y-intercept, is 20, which is way, way, way off of our grid. Okay, the x-intercept ends up being 2, and that is a plottable point. Okay, I can plot the point at 2. All right, so I need to try to come up with a way to find a different value here that I can plot. So if I imagine, you know, in this particular situation, remember we can always resort to a table of values. So if I think about my table, all right, and I pick a different number for x, okay, other than 0, because that's the number I tried and it didn't work. I could try the x value of 1. So when I plug 1 in for x, whoops, plus 1/2 y equals 10. I'm going to subtract the 5 from both sides. I'm going to get 1/2 y equals 5, which means when I divide by a half, y is going to be 10. Now it's at least within reason that I can plot that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right there's 8. So I can extend my graph 2 spots, 9, 10, to get my point. Okay? And there's times that's just a downside or a disadvantage of, graphing standard form like this. Keep in mind the alternative would be to solve for y, so that way it's in y equals form, or use a table of values. So alternatives, when the strategy you're trying to use does not work, okay, remember all the alternatives that we have for graphing right now. Okay, we have a table, we have shortcuts, so y equals, and we have standard form. When one of these options doesn't work, you simply move on and try a different option.